picking back up, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the mitochondria. So take a look at this graph and answer the question that I've got here. Which cell type in the graph might require the most energy? So you've got all of them lined up there on the other side. Liver, muscle, white blood cell, dermal cell, so that's just under your skin, your white adipose cell for fat storage, or a red blood cell. So which of them, according to the graph, might require the most energy? All right, so according to this graph, and if you took a look at it, this graph is showing the number of mitochondria in the different cells, right? And liver cells have a crazy number of mitochondria per cell. When we look at cell diagrams, usually they have like 1 to 3 mitochondria drawn into the cell. But there are actually no cells that only have 1 or 3 mitochondria. You can see something like a fat storage cell has at least 100. Now, granted, red blood cells don't have any, and that is because red blood cells have one single job. What is the job for a red blood cell? You don't have an idea, you can go ahead and take a guess. But what is the job of red blood cells? It is to carry oxygen, right? And so hopefully it should make sense. If your only job is to carry stuff, that it would make sense to not fill your cell up with things you don't need. And so that's why red blood cells don't have any mitochondria. They don't need any energy because they're just getting pushed around from place to place, and when they get there, they pick up their oxygen when they get to, when they get to the lungs, and then when they get to where they're going, they drop off their oxygen, pick up carbon dioxide, and they just keep going. So they don't need any energy to do that job. Versus these other ones, like your muscles, they need energy to be able to move. White blood cells need energy because they're going to be attacking and destroying things, and liver cells. So the thing is that, different cells have different needs for their mitochondria. These ones up here, liver cells and muscle cells, are going to have high numbers of mitochondria because they have high energy requirements. And you might be thinking, okay, it makes sense for muscle cells to have high number of mitochondria because they have to move, right? They have to contract and so forth to make our muscles move. But why does a liver cell need so many mitochondria? Well, what is the job of your liver? And you might not be so familiar with the job of your liver. The thing is that your liver is your filter. It is working to remove and break down toxins that you take in through what you eat and drink and, breathe and so forth. And that takes a lot of energy. Right? So these guys are going to have a ton of mitochondria to help power that system. Okay? All right. Our next organelle is one that doesn't really look like an organelle, but is incredibly important. So these guys I would never ask you to identify on a cell diagram because, as you can see, they just look like little packets. And that's pretty much what they are. Lysosomes are the cell's garbage disposals. Or you can also think of them as the cell's recycling centers. What they are is they're packages of membrane that are filled with enzymes and acid. Because what they do is they pick up or are sent things that need to be broken down. So in this picture, you can see there's actually some partially digested organelles. So in the picture, they put in like a little mitochondria. Whatever needs to be broken down. So if there's, like an organelle that needs to be recycled, there's some waste that needs to be broken down and recycled, these guys are going to get it. All right. So they're going to get sent that material. They'll take it inside, and then their enzymes and acids are going to break it down into the smaller pieces and then they'll send it out to be, sent wherever it needs to go. So if it's pieces that the cell can use, they'll be kept in the cell. If it's stuff that the cell can't use, then it'll be sent out as waste to be sent somewhere else, to be sent out of the body or whatever it needs to have done with it. Now, the thing is that these guys have over 50 different enzymes that they need to do their job. And there is a disease called Taysachs disease. It is like a strike by the trash collectors. Because they have these 50 different enzymes they need to do their job, and we talked in a previous lecture in chapter 3 about how you can misspell enzymes. So if you misspell an enzyme, it won't work, right? Because it'll be the wrong shape. So let's say that your enzyme needs to have its active site to be, this shape, but the misspelling makes it that shape, right? That misshapen enzyme will lead to problems. So Tay-Sachs is a genetic disorder because it's this misspelling of the enzyme, the directions for it. And what happens is the lysosomes now have a broken enzyme that can't break something down. Think about trash collectors on strike. What happens if trash collectors go on strike? Or what would happen if there's an enzyme that can't break something down? Yeah, stuff is going to build up, right? So that's exactly what happens with Tay-Sachs disease. One or more of these enzymes is broken, and the material is going to build up in the cells. And eventually it is fatal because there's no way for it to be broken down, and if you build up enough of any material, it becomes toxic. Generally, individuals who have inherited Tay-Sachs disease don't live past age 2 because there's no way to treat it, and there's, no way to remove the material that is building up in their system. We do have genetic tests now that can detect it, so we can at least let people know who may have the genetic marker that they may pass it on to their children. All right, so the next set of organelles is actually a set of organelles that work together. So we're going to talk about these 3. So I'm going to go through each one and then show you how they work together. So the first one is the rough ER. So ER stands for endoplasmic reticulum, but I'm okay if you just call it ER. In fact, very often you will see me type ER because I don't like to have to type out endoplasmic reticulum all the time. The rough ER is rough because it's covered in ribosomes. And you might remember from the earlier lecture from the prokaryotes that ribosomes make proteins. So this is basically a protein factory. All of the little workers, aka the ribosomes, are hanging out and making proteins. You can see that it's right near the nucleus, which makes sense because the directions are coming from the nucleus. And so the ribosomes get the directions to make proteins, and the rough ER is basically just a place for them to be, right? It's a location. So the rough ER is a protein factory where the ribosomes are at. So we've got a place to make proteins. We've got the smooth ER. Why is it called the smooth ER? Yeah, it's smooth. There are no ribosomes on the smooth ER, right? And the smooth ER has 2 jobs. One is that it does make stuff. So it makes lipids like fatty acids and phospholipids and sterols. And I remember that it's smooth not just because it doesn't have ribosomes, but it makes things that are smooth, are slippery, right? Remember that things like fats are slick or slippery. And so that's how I remembered what they made. The other thing that the Smoothie R does is it detoxifies, breaks down some nasty things like alcohol, drugs, and metabolic waste. So knowing that, what kinds of cells might have large amounts of Smoothie R? So what organ would have lots of Smoothie R in the cells? So, there we go. I thought I had the question. So which of these organs is going to have cells with the greatest amount of that smooth ER? That's what SER stands for. So the heart, the lungs, the kidney, the liver, or the brain. Let's take a look. And it is going to be the liver. I know that sounds weird, just like with mitochondria, that the liver has the highest amount of mitochondria, but the liver cells are packed with huge amounts of Smoothie R for the same reason, because the liver is doing that detoxification of these nasty materials. And so that's actually what you're looking at. You're looking at a cross section of underneath a really powerful microscope of a liver cell. This is all Smoothie R right here with a mitochondria plugged right in the middle of it. All right, so we've got rough ER, we've got Smoothie R, and then the last part of this endomembrane system is the Golgi. So the Golgi, sometimes you'll see it, as you can see here, named the Golgi apparatus. Sometimes it's listed as Golgi bodies. But the Golgi is the post office for the cell. So you can see it looks like stacks of pancakes with a bunch of little dots around it. The dots are the packages or the transport vesicles. What the Golgi does is it gets proteins, lipids, and other molecules from around the cell, and it takes a look at them, sees where they need to go, packages them out, and sends them. It's like the best post office in the world, right? It gets a package, takes a look, readdresses it, and then sends it to where it's going. So that's why it's all made out of all of these big membranes, because it's going to wrap them up in new pieces of membranes. So that's the Golgi. The Golgi is that post office. So let's see how these three work together. So we've got all three of them here in the cell, rough ER, Smoothie R, and the Golgi. And so here's how they work together. The rough ER and the Smoothie R are going to make their products, right? Rough ER is going to make proteins, Smoothie R is going to make the lipids and so forth. And they're going to both put them in little packages and little vesicles and send them over to the Golgi. The Golgi is going to accept those packages and process them, readdress them, and in this case, it's going to send them out. So it's going to send them out of the cell, and those little pieces and products will go to another cell. This package could also go somewhere else in the cell. So say, the rough ER needs some phospholipids to make, new membrane. So the package could be sent back to, say, the rough ER to, ship phospholipids or something. The packaging can also go the other way. So packages can come into the cell to the Golgi and be shipped inside the cell someplace. So that wraps it up for organelles that are found in both animal and plant cells. So you've been seeing them in an animal cell. The next lecture is going to take a look at the organelles that are found just in plant cells.